Excerpt from the memoirs of the late John L. Stevenson, founder of the Global Unity Advocacy Coalition. Standing alone, surrounded by a field of blood-red poppies, swaying softly in the mid-November breeze, the man pondered the true meaning of sacrifice. Here, 100-some years ago, thousands of men had decided to make the ultimate sacrifice, to stand against tyranny and oppression, and all the things he now was free of. Men of many nations laid down their lives to ensure his freedom, to ponder those exact same freedoms. They had all lived lives before being slain. They had embraced lovers, had eaten exquisite, delicious meals, had dreams of a life after the Great Wars, of a more peaceful world. Each one was a unique individual living entire lives before the Great Wars, and yet they had made the ultimate sacrifice, willingly or not, for generations of people they would never know. Each one had their reasons for serving, and each was as valid as the last, for, at the end, they had all stood for freedom, for laughter, for growing old, for change, for the past, for the present, and for the future. A lone tear rolled down the man's face, which was pinched in a mixture of bitter sorrow and rapturous appreciation. In that moment he could almost hear, understand, what they would say to him if they had lived to see this day. Live for freedom. Live so that your children and grandchildren may live an easier life. Live for anything, as long as it isn't for this godforsaken hell I've lived. Live in any way so that my sacrifice wasn't for naught. Another tear rolled down his now crimson cheek. He took a moment to compose himself. Turning around, the man saw his family behind him, watching him as he stood alone in the field. His young daughter and son, his twins who looked just like him, were waving urgently at him, ready to head back to their home, to their freedom granted by the sacrifice of many unknown men. They had their whole futures ahead of them. His wife stood there, looking at him with a frown. She knew how deeply moments such as these affected him. She only wished she could be there to comfort him as he came back to Earth from the ethereal places he traversed, any time they visited a site of import like this. Their future was here, and they were paving his path with every breath taken, with every moment lived. The man's father stood there, waiting patiently for his son to return to their vehicle. He smiled a small, knowing smile. The father knew the exact emotions his son was feeling. He had felt them himself when visiting this field for the first time, some 60 years ago, with his own father. He understood why his son was taking his time. His grandchildren, too, would understand in time, but they were yet too young. His whole future was behind him. The man walked towards the family vehicle, trying his best to hide his reddened face and puffy eyes. "Hop in the car. It's time to go," he told his children. As he absent-mindedly buckled his children into their car seats, he pondered, for the 1000th time today, the future. He took a moment to look each of his children in the eyes and saw the brilliant, bright spark of life in each of them. He would do anything to protect it, to make sure they never understood the evil the men who had died on this field had understood. He strapped himself into the driver's seat before instinctively reaching for and grabbing his wife's hand. He longed for the comfort it gave, for the sense of belonging and hope and comfort dwelling there. He found her hand, but it was tingled with the uncomfortable, esoteric knowledge he had gained, standing in the middle of that red poppy-filled field. He now understood how fragile the future was, and how it could all be taken away in an instant. As they drove away from this hallowed site, where so many had laid down their lives so that he may live his freely, he had one final thought. I must live my life brilliantly and brightly, so that those who come after me shall not live in darkness.